So there's constantly waiting for the right time to jump in. And that's how we listen to people. We're waiting to jump in. We're waiting to share our perspective, our viewpoint, our idea, versus diving deeper to hearing their perspective, their journey, because oftentimes there's so much more under that. And so how do we practically do that? We created a tool called the Power of Three. And the Power of Three is where you get at least into the third level of the conversation. Again, time permitting. Time doesn't always permit us to do this, but time permitting.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Justin Jones-Fosu to respectfully disagree. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Let's face it, these days on social media, the news, the entertainment, most people are not respectfully disagreeing. I've seen people unfriend people who they've been friends with their whole life because of something on social media. Honestly, that's crazy. We can respectfully disagree. I remember when my kids were growing up and we'd go to Gettysburg and they would talk about how at the end of the day of the battle, both sides would come down to the place where the water was and they'd each get water and then they'd go back to their sides. They could respectfully fight, which is kind of weird, but it is. I think we've lost that art, and we've forgotten that we're all just people. And how do we get along, and how do we do so even when we don't agree? Because the reality is, I'm not going to agree with most people, and that's okay. Our guest is Justin Jones-Fosu. He is the embodiment of energy, both at home and as a dedicated father. He's recently conquered one of the famed 7 summits. He has a passion for elevation, and it doesn't end with trekking. It's also how he does his speaking and his innovative social entrepreneurship. He's at the helm of Work Meaningful. It's the driving force and CEO behind a movement that empowers organizations across the globe. He's always out delivering keynote addresses on pivotal topics of meaningful work and inclusion. Let's meet Justin and see how we can respectfully disagree. Welcome to Richer Soul, Justin. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky. I'm really excited.
I'm excited to learn from you as well. We always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Man, almost zilch. I probably got a negative reaction or negative education to money. So we grew up, my parents divorced when I was 4. And so my mom, single mom with 2 rambunctious little boys, we were unhoused initially. And then we found an apartment, roach and rat infested, all those things, but we were on welfare initially. And my mom just worked her butt off to do the best she could with what she had. And so I remember my mom would not actually open bills because she knew she couldn't afford them. It's interesting. I can afford them, but I still have taken on that same character trait of I don't like opening bills. uh, and school in a similar way did not prepare me financially. More so, I started getting more tips when I got to college. Now, my mom would take me to workshops and things on finance and financial management. We just didn't have a lot of money to engage. Now, juxtapose that with my dad, who I did not grow up with, and my dad is a world renowned economist and worked for United Nations and was chairman of the economics department at Oakland University in Michigan, and then went on to live in Ethiopia, Kenya, Finland as a deputy director for UN University. Um, so my dad and my two brothers, my half brothers on my dad's side, had a different financial outlook. Where one of my brothers actually went to a boarding school in Virginia where I think all the guys got cigars in graduation at 18. And then he was talking to one of his buddies, Mike. I don't remember the guy's name, but he was like, "Hey, Mike, are you going to South Carolina, I guess to Myrtle Beach for graduation?" He's like, "No, my dad's making me go fishing off the coast of Spain again." And that's when I knew I lived a different life than my little brother.
So how did you guys get split up? Mom, dad, was there
Half
specifics to that?
brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm the only product of my mom and dad. So I have an older brother that's from my mom's first marriage. And I am the product of my mom's second marriage. I'm the product of my dad's first marriage, and my two little brothers are the product of my dad's second marriage.
Okay. And it doesn't sound like he supported your mom or you much.
Not the way that I think my mom or I would have liked. I mean, there are some things that he did, but yeah, it wasn't in ways that were as beneficial as they could be. Now, again, it's a very complicated, and people do the best with what they can. But yeah, I wasn't supported in ways that I at least would have liked to have been.
No, and that's tough.
Yeah.
Beyond the money, what was it like when you were growing up? Because you had somewhat of an interesting childhood with all these different things going on.
Yeah, it was amazing. What I mean amazing is my mom. My mom did so much. My mom is my hero, and she, even though we didn't have a lot of money, she taught us valuable lessons. I mean, we would go to Salvation Army to get our clothes before it became cool, and she would get like little sweater vests and bow ties because that's where she was trying to create a boys to men group. But we would go out to experience the world. So we would go to Oktoberfest and Polish festivals and Hispanic Heritage Month events and First Peoples powwows. And we had exchange students from France and Japan and Germany for 2 years in Brazil. And so I just learned a lot. And part of that came from my mom being in the military. And she was she was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And she considered herself a citizen of the world. And so I got an awesome opportunity to experience the beauty of that citizenship, even without a lot of money. And so that's the adventure side my mom created, which I loved. And so we would go camping, not because my mom thought camping was cool, we couldn't afford a hotel. Now, the interesting thing, Rocky, is that now I backpack and camp in the Grand Canyon and Patagonia and all that stuff. So the seeds were planted in a way that I don't think my mom expected.
You know what? You can plant a tree, but you never know what it's going to grow into, do you?
Absolutely.
Now, you also dealt with some racial stuff. You talked about it a little bit in your book because your peers looked at you differently, and you didn't fit into either group there, which was interesting to me. Like, what was it that caused your peer group to say you don't belong to us?
Yeah, so I always tell people that I wasn't Black enough for the Black kids, and I wasn't obviously white for the white kids, and so I never felt like I fit in. And so for the Black kids, it was, my mom was an educator. And so even though we grew up in the hood, so it wasn't like this middle class life and all those kind of things. And so I talked the same way I do now. And so I was told that I talked white. I remember calling one of my girlfriends back in the day, and I called her house, and her mom had answered the phone. And I heard her, after she had picked up the phone, she said to her daughter, she's like, is Justin white? And so like that, I often got, I often got that aspect from the Black kids, and just because of how my mom taught me to speak and to engage myself. But then, I grew up in a hood, and so I didn't have the money, so I didn't fit in with some of the well-to-do kids, whether Black and or white, and it taught me something. Before, I felt lonely, but what I realized later on is that I was never supposed to fit in, Rocky. That I was called to be a bridge, and in many aspects of my life, not just racially, but just a bridge between people who see each other as others at times. And so that's been the journey of my life, of just being a bridge for others.
When did you get that aha?
It was in 2004.
Okay.
And I remember I was in I don't know if I can say the word today, jokingly, but I was in a diversity session. And there was this Black woman and this white male who was teaching about how do we embrace difference, right? And so it was really pretty cool, right? It was done in a way that I think diversity should be done, right? It wasn't just about race. It was about how do we create places and cultures where people feel like they belong, whether we agree with their ideology or not. And I remember as they were talking, something hit me, Rocky, and I was like an out of body experience. So it was a U-shaped classroom. I was sitting in the middle of the U, and something they said, and I don't know what exactly, but it just made me start weeping because it unlocked something. And I was like, that's why I never fit in. I wasn't supposed to. You think about bridges. Bridges aren't supported except for small planks, depending on what type of bridge, right? There's suspension bridges, there's other things. The ground is concrete, and most people had like concrete crews or people or groups that they hung with. And I was kind of a nomad, right? And I would go and engage with this group, and I'd go and engage with this group. And I never felt the full support. And I realized there was a purpose in it. And unfortunately, I'm able to tap into that purpose now to help connect groups and people that normally wouldn't connect outside of other bridges like myself.
You made a comment there right before you started about whether or not you were allowed to say that word. And I get it. It's a joke. And it seems when things went radically to the one side a couple of years ago, I was like,
yeah.
This is a pendulum, and it's going to swing radically to the other side. Y'all 100%. Better watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. And I find that more often than not, and I'm thinking back, how far back do these diversity programs go? I mean, for my whole corporate career, and I started working in the late 80s.
Yeah, it was around the 80s.
Yeah. It was late 80s. There was always the word diversity, but it was always done incorrectly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. And I think that's why there's so much negative vibes on the one side with regards to it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you've seen.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, but I'd say it's like any other field. Like sales was done wrong in the 80s, right? It was very transactional and right.
Yes.
And it was about, always be closing in the sense of where you're not really listening to your customers and the things that matter the most to them rather than just kind of like, and this is the benefit, this is the benefit. So I think there's been an evolution of it. And so probably about 10, 12 years ago, I was saying something similar. Is I would have people come up to me in some of our diversity inclusion sessions and it's like, wow, Justin, this is the first time I felt included in a diversity inclusion session. And initially I took it as a badge of honor, like, go Justin. But then it made me sad because I realized how many people weren't getting this type of development. And that's, and I'll talk about it in three ways. It's much more, but that we've approached diversity and inclusion. I realized I started off doing it wrong because I was just following the model that I saw. At least I wanted to provide something different. So number one, it was not based on shame. It wasn't, it's 2025 and you still struggle with Rocky, I struggle with stuff. I get stuff wrong. I have wrong thoughts. I have biases. I think wrong things of people, right? And it's about me challenging those thoughts and getting better. So, motivational theory that flies in the face. People don't respond to shame as a driver for growth. They respond to being inspired and what could be aspirational. So, number one, it wasn't based on shame. Number two, it wasn't just the big three. It wasn't just about race, gender, and identity. It's about all of us, where we come from, socioeconomic status, country, heritage, language, religion, politics. All of us are a part of diversity. So I love when people say, I don't like diversity. I'm like, ooh, awesome. Tell me more about that. Like, how do you define diversity? Because every single one of us is a part of diversity, because at its simplest form, it just means difference. And the third aspect of it that we really hit home on is that we'll never get it 100% right. And that's the thing of like, I'm still growing. I'm still making progress. I still make mistakes. And we can show people that it's about creating spaces where people feel seen, valued, and heard, whether we agree with them or not. It allows us to be able to create spaces where people want to come to work, want to work with us, want to better engage. And so that's the approach that we've taken with diversity and inclusion, which became, allowed us to really help people of all different backgrounds to embrace it, because all of us are part of diversity.
And it's finding that common ground within and working through that. And we've talked about this in the past, and I totally agree. So how did you come to do the work you do? I mean, was it because of that aha moment, or was there more to it?
Yeah, there was many catalyst moments that shaped me. I was part of my MBA is in leadership and organizational change. And so I was really passionate about like purpose-driven leadership. So how do we really connect people to purpose? And which is still a lot of the work we do with Work Meaningful. And how do we bring meaning to our work rather than trying to find it, right? It's an internal out approach rather than external. But when I was working for a top financial firm, I was voluntold to be a part of the diversity committee. And you can tell why, Rocky, because I'm bald. And the interesting thing in that journey is that I saw a lot of ways that it was being done wrong. And I started doing it wrong. And I started leaning into it a little bit more and approaching it differently. But I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to be the black guy doing diversity. So I was still doing the focus on purpose-driven leadership, which is why my book, Your Why Matters Now, was the first book that I really leaned into. But that I had companies, in terms of Mercedes and Toyota and other companies, that are like, wow, Justin, like, I really appreciate how you're approaching this and how you're actually helping all of our employees to feel included. And it took them challenging me, as well as George Floyd, May 25th, 2020, to help me to come out of hiding from the work that I was doing. And that was more significant for me than most, Rocky, because my birthday is May 25th. Mm-hmm. And so there's just a lot that happened that shaped me in this work. And all of it came back to my mom. My mom planted these seeds in me years ago, and I wasn't living up to my mom's ideals. And so I began to practice and share with others the same principles my mom would do. Rocky, my mom would have us go to events we didn't even agree with, Rocky. Like, I'd be sitting in the audience like, Mom, we didn't even agree with this. Why are we here? But she was planting these seeds that even in the midst of our ideological differences, there's still humanity amongst us. And even though I didn't follow suit, later on in my life, those seeds they germinated, and they have now blossomed.
And it seems like we're further and further apart than ever. However, it's because we only look at history through a very small time lens. We are going through a cycle. And if you haven't read the book, Fourth Turning, it really goes through how we go through these generational cycles. And we're at the end of this 100-year generational cycle. And this is just what happens at this point. And we'll get through it, and we'll come out the other side to a much more wonderful, better news cycle. And so you just deal with it.
Yes. And we're actually way more connected, Rocky, than I think we think. It's just we allow the loudest voices to be the ones we listen to the most. And the more and more I'm out there talking to people and going into workplaces, I just came back from an engagement that was, very diverse in multitude of different ways. And we have so much in common. We just have chosen not to focus on the things that we have in common. We've chosen to, other people based upon what we think we want to see and believe and hear, and everything's bad about them and everything's good about us. And with social media, it doesn't help because people are easy to be able to create monologues. And in the news, I used to be part of the news. I used to host a radio show, and you only really focus on the sensational stories. And so I've found that there's often been a majority of people that are more in the middle than we believe. And if we took the time to hear people's stories, to learn, to engage, to ask more questions, it would allow us to see that we have much more in common than the media as well as social media lets us believe.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And I've noticed that, you'll see the sensational headline and I'll click on it and I'm like, the article doesn't say that. Not even like, if you didn't read it, you would walk away with the wrong outcome or the wrong outlook or the wrong idea. And then the second part of it is just the constant sharing of misinformation that is just so blatantly wrong. Yeah. But, I think I think it's getting better, but I don't know. What I've noticed is sometimes on social media, you'll see like an auto-generated kind of response that says, this is XYZ, it's not correct type of thing.
Right. A lot of companies have turned that off. There was some aspect of that, but we're seeing some increase in the AI deepfakes. And so AI generated things that are actually helping to provide misinformation on all different sides. And that's why I encourage actual conversations with people. Like I refuse to debate with people on social media because it's the worst form of actual healthy conversation. And so I generally don't, engage. And so if people want to engage with me or debate on something, I was like, hey, let's take this to a direct message. What we found in our research is that actually having audio, right? If we're able to have an audio, and some of these social media platforms allow for audio, it allows us to better understand the tone. You don't even need video, but at a minimum, audio helps us to understand the tone in much deeper ways so that we're not able to read our own tone into the conversations. And so when having tough conversations, I tell people, you don't always need to be on camera, even though camera is helpful, but the audio is sufficient enough to help us to ascertain tone.
Yeah, I don't know that my sarcasm comes through always in my writing.
I need a sarcasm emoji. Sarcasm. Right? even letters like SMH, right? Rocky, for years I was getting that wrong. I thought that meant smiling mad hard. And so I would put SMH, right, to things. And people, were probably wondering, why was he saying SMH, right? Versus shaking my head. So like even people like me get the acronyms of things wrong. So I'm still figuring it out.
Well, and everyone has their own interpretation. And then
Yeah.
the interpretations change. And then it's like, wait, what? Who told like
Right.
I didn't realize that responding okay is bad. You didn't know that?
I'm
You
now I'm
respond, you respond okay to Gen Z on a text message. Oh man, that's like a problem.
well, yeah, well, okay. Well, and I can see that now because if you're responding, hey, Rocky, you want to go into the library with me? Um, it's more of a thumbs up. It's not going to be an okay. Because I guess okay was like, oh, okay. It's kind of
It,
almost
well, or
denotes that.
it's like they're giving you some information or they're just updating you on something that's not an
Yeah.
emotional thing. It's just whatever. And you're like,
Yes.
or they're just they're updating you on something. You're like, okay, like I got it. Thank you for letting me,
Yeah.
it's just that casual and
Mm,
it it's generational. They look
yeah.
at it different than everyone like that, because that's what we used to do back in the day. The fingers and the
Yeah. Oh,
it's
okay,
funny how
Rocky.
that is. Doesn't bother me. Hey, my generation's okay with that. So, what inspired you to write the book? I respectfully disagree.
Yeah. So in our workshops on the inclusive mindset, which again was about all of us and how do we embrace this mindset. Thank you, Carol Dweck. Uh, I would make this statement that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity. And there's always like this audible gasp or like, or ah, or people nodding their heads. And then time after time, people will come up after the session and say, Justin, I love that quote, but how do we do it? Or they would say, but what if they believe this? And after hearing it over and over again, it's one of the things I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, you hear enough from your customers and clients, it makes you say, okay, I need to address this. And so that became kind of the impetus. Now, what I didn't realize, Rocky, until recently, I was speaking for a client and we were going over your why matters now. We were actually walking through some of the chapters in the book and helping people understand their why. I asked the question, what would you like to see the world look like? And I wrote this in 2017. And I would love, one of the things was where we could respect each other even when we disagreed. And I forgot I forgot I wrote that. It's been in me. This book just came out in 2024 and I started working on it in 2023. So I had no idea that then the seed planted about how I wished and envisioned the world could be would actually be a book that I would write. And so it's just sometimes the stuff that's already inside of us and we don't even realize it.
Oh, it's all inside of us. You
Yeah.
just you got to open the door and let it out.
Yes.
I tell
Yes, yes,
people
yes.
all the time, you're the biggest obstacle is the mirror, that
Yeah.
reflection. So
Yes.
I think it's having the courage and the focus to be there and to do it.
Yeah. And sometimes they're customers. So for me, I always told the story of the customers, right? Like my clients, the participants in our learning experiences, they're the ones who are the catalyst. And I didn't realize I was actually the catalyst and they were just a reflection of what was already inside.
True. So you break it down into 5 pillars: challenge your
Mhm.
perspective, be the student, cultivate your curiosity, seek the gray, agree to respect. So let's kind of
Yeah.
dig into those. I'll let you
Yeah.
go however you think is best.
Yeah. I'll kind of go pillar by pillar. And if there's things that you want to
Okay.
stop me in each pillar, I think will be helpful. So we have the 5 pillars. Now, let me be very clear. It could have been 100 pillars, Rocky. But one, it would have been a long book nobody would have read. But two, we found in our research that these 5 pillars really rose to the top. And the first pillar, which is actually the last pillar we added, is challenge your perspective, which happens before any disagreement even occurs. Now, this is not just for big societal issues. This is for workplace. This is for home. And challenging your perspective is where you intentionally hear perspectives and viewpoints and ideologies that are different than yours. I had one of my buddies, James Robliata, say, what if we actually listened to people like we were wrong? And it imbues an opportunity for us to build those muscles so that when we hear viewpoints, disagreements, things that are we don't necessarily connect with, that it doesn't rattle us emotionally and it doesn't hijack our brain as much because we've intentionally chosen to hear perspectives that are different than ours. So let me give some practical ways to lean into that. From a leadership perspective, I want to encourage leaders to cancel, yes, I said cancel, the open door policy. Cancel it, because many of us created the open door policies behind closed doors. We even done things like, I'll be on Microsoft Teams from Tuesday through Thursday, 3 to 5 p.m. And we challenge this around the world to move to what we call an out the door policy. Open door implies you have to come to me. But as entrepreneurs and as leaders, what if we took the initiative to go to our people, to go and hear their stories, to go and ask them about their journey? What brought you here? What brought you to our organization? What brought you to our company? Right? So not abandoning completely the open door policy, but taking a more intentional approach to hearing the perspectives and stories of others. Well, one way to do that, because you may say, Justin, that sounds great. That sounds like a theoretical, awesome opportunity. But how do I do it? I have too much to do. I have a lot going on. I'm an entrepreneur. I have things going on. I'm a high executive leader in my company. Well, I'm going to give you two mathematical formulas. Number one is one meaningful connection per week, one MC over W. What if you built into your calendar 15 to 20 minutes each week to actually have a meaningful conversation with someone in your workplace, someone in your community, a family member, friend? And if that's too much, because that's 52.14 times a year, then flip the W upside down and make it one meaningful connection per month. And maybe it's 1 month or one lunch. And you're actually hearing perspectives and viewpoints. Now, be very careful, because it's easy for us to only want to connect to people that we already agree with, or people that we already sense a sense of strong relational capital. But this is the opportunity to hear perspectives and viewpoints that you normally wouldn't get, whether at work and or your community. And so strategically, that's one way that it allows us to challenge our perspective.
Okay, this one's a struggle for me for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't equate an open door policy with not doing that. I don't think that they are mutually exclusive. Like, you can do both. Two,
100%.
If you're a leader and you're not out understanding what's going on at the front, you have no clue what's going on in your organization. You have no clue what's going around you. And we haven't talked about it recently, but one of the biggest problems at being at the top is everyone around you tells you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear.
Yes.
And so you kind of get locked into that. The other one was when you said to ask the question, is it true? It kind of reminded me of Byron Katie's work. I don't know if you know Byron Katie. Byron Katie.
I didn't say, is it true? Tell me more about that.
Oh, I thought you said to challenge it, to ask yourself, is it true? Or maybe that's just the way I took it, to challenge the belief that you have about something. It was when you first started, you said that. Yeah.
Yes. Challenge your perspective. So it's choosing to hear perspectives that are different than yours. Yes.
Right. And so to me, it's like, it's saying, is it true? Is what I'm believing true? And do I really know that? And it just reminded me of her work, because her thing is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react when you believe that thought? And who would you be without that thought? So it's like almost like what you're saying is her work of us changing our internal and not grading against something that isn't the problem out there. It's the problem in here.
I mean, I love some of that work. And so I love that you struggle with it. Thank you for your honesty, because that's a whole different category we dug into this whole thing called disrespectful agreement, where we just go along and we're like, oh yeah, absolutely, right? But we're like behind closed doors, Rocky's like, that Justin guy, that was a stupid idea. Challenge your perspective. Why would I do that? So I appreciate you sharing that you
Well,
struggled with it. Right?
no, I'm the guy who blurts it out right then and there. And then I get in trouble. And then I'm like, all right, well, show me I'm wrong and I'll accept it. And I'm cool.
Yes. And I don't think you're wrong. I think
No, I'm saying
leaders.
challenge me. Challenge my belief system. Let's figure out what the real truth is here.
Yeah. And what I'm going to say is I'm a person who seeks the gray. I don't think you're wrong. I think you're approaching it differently than I am, right? I think you have the ideal perspective of leaders. And unfortunately, as I'm out there at these workplaces, there are far more leaders that come up to me and say, thank you. I realized just even today, I had a leader who's like, you know what? I haven't been spending enough time going and hearing the stories and perspectives of the people. And so that's the ideal of a leader. But we as leaders sometimes get so focused and stuck in the things that we have to do, the activities, the transactions. You know, E-Myth Revisited, we spend so much time working in our business that we're not executing in ways that are helpful. So even though that sounds simple, it's something that's necessary.
That was the other thing I was going to disagree with. And not disagree, but like, if that's the way you're running in your business, you got to fix your business and the way you run your business, because that's just a mess. You should have time to do this, because that's just baseline common sense. That's all. All right.
Yes. Yeah. But we don't always operate in common. I mean, there's so many things we know to do, Rocky, that we just don't do. I'm sure some of your listeners are like, you know what? I probably need to spend some more time hearing stories. I need to hear perspectives. I need to go and hear, right? And that's okay, because all of us are part of growth. We don't always operate in the same ideal. I mean, one of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, I love the focus in terms of the gap versus the gain. And so I remember just kind of talking with him and Babs and just like, hey, talk to me a little bit more about this. And so the interesting thing is that we have an ideal that keeps moving, but we do have to measure our progress against it. And so I think, yes, leaders should be doing that. But for those who aren't, it's an opportunity. The second piece I'd say that I may approach it just slightly differently is sometimes just challenging our perspective. It allows us to see the humanity before us, because oftentimes we get second and third hand information. It's from media or other sources, and we don't see the humanity. And that's what my mom did for me. And I love that she did that. She would take us to the events that we disagreed with. And I was just like, wow, there's still humanity there. So in proximity, bred empathy. But guess what? There's sometimes I didn't walk away like, you know what? I believe exactly what you believe. And we often think just because we challenge our perspectives that we're going to believe other perspectives. And that's not true, but it does allow us to, one of the quotes I often state now is that even when we're closed-minded, we should never stop being open-hearted. And one of the ways that we're open-hearted is in hearing people's stories. And so in challenging perspectives, one of the ways is in engaging people feeling valued and seen, is being able to share their story. And so that's one of the reasons that we think that, challenging a perspective allows us to actually engage in more respectful dialogue.
And I do think that's an important part of it. And I'm guessing Dan Sullivan wouldn't put up with people with time management problems either.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yes, everybody was
the
on
way
time,
he is.
right?
I get it. That's the world I live in. That's the way we do things.
Yes.
All right.
Accountability. Yes.
Accountability.
Yeah.
The next pillar was be the student, right? Or is there another one that you think is more appropriate?
No, be the student's the next one. And that's where we spend more time listening and learning than lecturing. And a lot of us, we like lecturing, especially when we're smart, or we've learned a lot, or we have a positional title. Rather than, even the greatest salespeople are great listeners. They're great students. They listen to their clients. They listen to what matters to them, what's important to them. And being the student, we've lost the art of true, deep listening with people. And one of the things that we found is that there's an inverted U theory where it normally is attached to performance, but it also applies to learning. And there's two places they found out learning isn't as effective. One, when we think that we know absolutely nothing, but the opposite side is when we think we know absolutely everything. And if I'm convinced that I know everything, I'm not going to lean into hearing your perspective and hearing where I may find the gray, which is another pillar, which I'll lead right into pillar number 3, which is cultivate your curiosity. And cultivate your curiosity is where we fill in the gaps with more curiosity rather than conclusions. And oftentimes we call it the dotted line dilemma. So we're going to test this out. I want you to answer. I don't want you to think about it real quick, Rocky. All right. So I want you to answer real quick. All right. What is the correct side of the road to drive on? Go.
Right. In the United
Yes.
States.
Okay. Yes. But you know what you did? You thought about it, right? Because you wanted to be right. And that's what we often do. But I did a podcast with someone in Australia and they were like left. I'm like, why? It's like, it's the safest. Why would anybody do it? And I've had people in my audiences that, may have lived in places where it was very different. And they struggled with it, not because they were trying to think what's the right answer, but they were just like, wait a minute, like I lived in Australia or I lived in UK and I lived in the United States. And our context, the reason we say that is our context matters. And if we don't ask more questions, then we'll automatically assume that anybody who doesn't drive on the right side is wrong.
And I think because I've been around the world, I know that a lot of places they drive on the other side of the road, even in this hemisphere. Because where were we? We were in St. Thomas.
Jamaica too. Yeah. Jamaica drives on the left side.
Yeah. It's, you just don't realize it. We live in our little world, right?
You do. And so that's why cultivating our curiosity is so important. And go ahead. I want to give you a practical way to do that, but go ahead.
No. Give me the practical way, and then we'll go to my point.
Awesome. The practical way is we encourage people to challenge what we call a double Dutch style communication. And in double Dutch style, it's, for those who don't know double Dutch, it's like two ropes going like this, going back and forth, and somebody waiting to jump in. So there's constantly waiting for the right time to jump in. And that's how we listen to people. We're waiting to jump in. We're waiting to share our perspective, our viewpoint, our idea, versus diving deeper to hearing their perspective, their journey, because oftentimes there's so much more under that. And so how do we practically do that? We created a tool called the Power of 3. And the Power of 3 is where you get at least into the third level of the conversation. Again, time permitting. Time doesn't always permit us to do this, but time permitting. So Power of 1 is, Rocky, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine too. That's Power of 1. Power of 2, Rocky, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. What makes you fine? Oh, I heard this interesting bald head speaker. I remember that bald head speaker. That's Power of 2. But Power of 3 will take all those things and say, well, what made him interesting? And we often stop at the Power of 1 or Power of 2 because we can't wait to get it back to ourselves. Now, oftentimes that's just because we're trying to form connections. But in trying to form connections, we end up taking control. And we never actually get to explore and hear what other people are sharing. And I'm gonna close with this piece for the Power of 3. I was just at an engagement for a very well-known company, and one of the guys came up. He was from legal, and he shared. He's like, man, like I understand I'm supposed to communicate understanding, but he's like, when I'm talking to the guys in the field and at the branches, how do I communicate? I understand, because it always comes off like patronizing, or that I'm, better than, and I was like, well, when they come to you, do you automatically go, oh, I understand what you're saying? Or do you ask more questions? Because oftentimes we automatically go to, oh yeah, I understand, when we haven't even shown that we understand. And so the Power of 3 allows us as entrepreneurs, as leaders, to be able to actually understand. Instead of saying, you know what, I understand. He's like, you know what, Rocky, thank you for helping me better understand that perspective. I never heard it that way before. That shows that someone feels valued and heard, and allows us to actually make a difference in our communication with them. So anyway, but that's one of the things we can do at home as well as at work, is engage in the Power of 3.
And I like that framework. As you were talking, a whole bunch of things came up. And the first is when you're in a meeting and you're going next, you spend all your time thinking about what you're saying and nobody's listening to what actually got said.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
good.
having that type of format causes that issue, or when you're holding a thought and
Yeah,
doing that. Um, I'm naturally an introvert, so I'm perfectly fine just sitting there quietly listening.
yeah,
And it's just my thing. And it's funny because my kids know I'm like that. And sometimes their friends are like, "Oh, he's just sitting there. He's not paying attention." They're like, "Oh no, he's listening to everything." They're like, "Oh," they don't get
yes,
it, you know.
yeah,
Um, and it's funny. Just last night we were having the conversation of, what do you say when people ask, like how it's going? And I was like, "Oh, the word that's always good is unbelievable." Because no
yeah,
matter what's going on, it doesn't give the standard response, right? It
yeah.
breaks the pattern up. And then earlier, as you were talking, I was thinking about Marshall Rosenberg and all his work with nonviolent communication. And actually, a lot of
Mm,
that came out of the desegregation movement. And it's
yeah,
amazing. He's like, husband and wife never listen to each other because they're not listening to their needs and their feelings, which
yes.
is kind of what you brought up. And then the other thing, and this used to come up in our mastermind group, they were like, because the A-type personalities are always like, "Oh yeah, I know that," and then I did this. So they're always trying to play
Right.
one-upmanship. Um,
Yeah.
and so those were just some things that came out that were packed in there that it's like, oh, there's a whole lot to this.
There's opportunity, and it's an unbelievable opportunity. But there's an unbelievable opportunity to dive in deeper. And it causes us to pause. I think somebody else gave a different framework. I'm currently doing tours some of the Toyota manufacturing plants, and one of the leads shared this concept called wait. So I would give her credit for that. And she learned this where, you know, she would, when someone shares something, in our brains to say wait. And the question is, why am I talking? And so, what is the point of in this moment to talk versus, you know what? That's a really good perspective. Like, when did you first learn about unbelievable? When did you start using that? Oh wow! Like, tell me more about unbelievable, right? Like, is it, how have people responded when they've said unbelievable? When you said unbelievable, right? Like, that allows us to dive in deeper. And Rocky, let me break something down. This is not just business. This is for
Mm-hmm.
my kids. Like, I've been practicing the power of three with my four kids, and I realized, I started having a hypothesis because everybody tells me, "Oh, Justin, the ages of your kids are perfect. They still listen to you." And then I had a hypothesis, and I'll tell you in a couple of years if it's true or not. I was like, I wonder, because my kids right now, we still have good conversations. And I said, I wonder if kids, as they've gotten older, stop listening or stop talking to us because they realize when they were younger, we weren't really listening. Or people are very different than you, Rocky.
How old's your oldest?
8, 9, 13, 14.
So 13, 14 is usually when they figure out that shift. And I know most people say, "Oh, the teenage years are brutal." It is my honest to God belief
Yeah.
that the way your kids treat you from 13 to 18 is the way you
Mm,
treated them from like 2 to 7.
that's so
Okay?
good, brother.
It's a
That's so good.
reflection.
That's so
And
good.
you are absolutely correct. The kids get exasperated. They're like, "You haven't been listening to me for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm no longer." At 13, they go, "I'm no longer listening to you."
Yeah.
But when you listen to them and I'll say teach them,
Mm,
in the sense of, you take a situation from their world and then
yes.
apply the lesson in their world, then you have constant communication at any age. And
Yeah.
there is no problem there. So
Yeah.
you're on the right track. The problem is none of these parents are listening, and you can't fix
Yeah.
it at 16 too damn late.
Yeah. Yeah, I will, if you would allow me to respectfully disagree.
You can
I actually,
disagree all you want.
I agree with you, but what I will say that it's never too late. And what I mean by that is it still can be a time to plant seeds to show, even if you're not getting what you invested 2 to 7, that they'll, as they're adults, they'll see some of the seeds that you planted even at 16. But I want to give this: it's to acknowledge what you've done and to also apologize for it versus just changing your behavior. Because one of the things that can be helpful, not always, it's not a magic bullet, but it's like, one of my sons is Peter. Peter, I realized I really haven't been listening the way I could listen to you. And I'm sorry. Um, I haven't engaged in really kind of trying to understand your perspective. And I'd love to figure out ways that I can, be better. And yes, again, does it always work? No, but I think my kids have appreciated some aspect of me apologizing when I get things wrong, even though I know a lot of parents won't apologize to their kids. And I think that's a mistake.
I agree with you. And I will say, my comment is, at 16, you're not
Yeah.
going to change it probably by 18 unless you
Right.
do
I
some
agree.
radical stuff.
Yeah. I agree with you.
And if you don't start changing it and fixing it at 16,
Yeah.
you're going to be paying for their therapy at 30 because you're the reason they're in therapy at 30.
Yeah.
My dad didn't love me. He never listened to me. He never paid attention to me. Now
What'd you
I'm
say,
living
Rocky?
in the
What'd you say?
Yeah. Trust me, I see it all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's a good word, brother.
So let's get to the gray. This is not 50 Shades of Gray, right? This is a different kind of gray, correct?
No, it's 51 shades, sir. But no, the gray is finding common ground. I'm very intentional about saying common ground rather than middle ground, because middle ground implies 50-50. And often things are not 50-50. Very rarely are they. And so common ground is where do we find, where's this consensus, right? So a great example with my dad, as I chose to listen to his story, as I went to go confront him for not being in my life, and I listened. And as I was listening, I was trying to find these points of common ground of where I could connect, where he tried, even though he did the best with what he had. And it allowed me to hear him differently in trying to find the common ground rather than trying to find all the points where we disagreed. Similar thing. One of the things that I encouraged people to do when we were doing the elections, I was like, whoever is your opposing candidate, I want you to listen to where you actually agree with them. Where are some things that you connect with? And so there's research behind this and conversational receptiveness. But say we're talking about gun rights or gun control. Instead of starting off conversations around "you're stupid, why don't you have a gun in the house? You're stupid, why do you have a gun in the house?" The common ground places, you know what, I'm really glad we both care about the safety of our families. Is that people are willing to engage in conversations in a much more deeper and respectful way, rather than attacking someone. So the common ground places where seeking the gray matters.
And that's kind of where we started the whole conversation is finding the areas of agreement. And I see that. I come from the world of finance. And when people make a decision, it's always like, well, I want that. And so I'm going to buy it, because if I don't buy it, I'm going to be unhappy. And that's why, they get 68 boxes at Amazon coming a day to their house. And my point is, it's not don't buy, be unhappy. It's there's choices to be made here. I'm not going to buy this because I would rather have this in this. Right. But if you don't play that game of it's not A and it's not Z, there's 24 other letters in the middle there that you can play with, you can start to make better choices. But I don't think we're taught where everything is a black and white decision. It's not, wait a minute. this doesn't have to be this. I have all these other choices to go.
No, absolutely. I think one thing that people see if you look up my book is that in the middle, most people have no idea, is the thin gray line between the black and the white. And it's very intentional that way. It's because we often see the black and white. And one of the things that really inspired me during my MBA, one of my professors had me read this weird book that I consider weird. Like, why am I reading this? It was a book called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. And he challenged this notion of A and B thinking. That I'm normally coming in A, you're coming with B, and now I get my allies. So I go, and when I'm going to the meeting, hey, I need y'all to support me on A, right? And then you're getting your ally support at B, and now we're just having a battle in the boardroom rather than asking, what's C? Where do we find C? Not as a 50-50, but it could be 95-5 or 60-40. But if we're not asking or proactively searching for C, then we're losing out on opportunities of innovation, creativity, and creating things that wouldn't have come forward from just my idea and or yours. And so looking for that C or the gray is very important, especially as leaders.
That it is. I concur with you. So we've got one more pillar to go, right? Agree to respect.
Yes. Notice you didn't say agree to disagree. and that's what we've often done. It's like this been this agree to disagree. But what we've seen is people have done it very dismissively, and even as leaders. And so our agree to respect is it's formulating our plan to humanize others, right? And part of the humanization is one way we can do that is full acknowledgement. And it's what we are 3FA framework, is that you could fully acknowledge someone whether you 100% agree, 100% disagree, or partially agree. And Sean Zhao, Stanford professor, came up with this concept called thank you because. And it simply go like this. You know what, Rocky, thank you because I've never heard it shared that way before, and I appreciate you sharing that. Rocky, wow. You mentioned three things. I want to thank you because like number two really resonated. I got to dive in deeper for the research, but I'll come back with you, but I appreciate you. Or simply, and this is a tough conversation for us to have, Rocky. And thank you because you didn't have to have it with me, and you still chose to. Not once did I say I agreed with you, but we've often conflated full acknowledgement with full agreement. And we can leave people feeling fully acknowledged. So that's just one way. The other way is conversational receptiveness. And conversational receptiveness is a great body of research and work behind this. And one of the four things in the recipes is how do we hedge to soften our claims? So instead of speaking in absolutes and just swatting people down, like nobody believes that, what if instead, approached it from, one of the things I've seen from my perspective is X. It allows people to feel like you're actually having a true conversation rather than a simple monologue. And so some component of agreeing to respect is saying, hey, even in the midst of my disagreements with you, even if I am still completely ideologically different than you, I can fully acknowledge you. And I can also hedge my claims rather than speaking in absolutes.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle, we find these things. And I like that you give us practical ways to show respect without having to agree to or disagree with their belief. It's like, hey, it's a nice way to kind of end the situation, so to speak.
Thank you. First of all, thank you because that is encouraging to me because that was the heartbeat of why we came up with, we want to give people practical ways to lean into the conversation. And one of the things that we often found was that, I sometimes people share some really wild thoughts with me, right? About their beliefs of afterlife or other things. And, maybe it'd be wild to them, it'd be wild to me. And I can immediately shut them down. Like, I think that's stupid. Why would you believe that? But there's been times where I know I'm not going to be persuaded. But I still choose to hear their stories. Like, tell me more. Like, when did you first believe that? And what it has done for me is it's allowed me to better understand how people got there, even if it never changes my mind. And that's the thing that I think we're missing out on, better understanding how people reach certain conclusions. And last thing I'd say about agreeing to respect is, man, Sometimes, Rocky, we're just seed planters. Sometimes that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to win rather than planting seeds of respect. And so I tell the story of Daryl Davis, and you probably have heard of him because you're well read and well knowledge. And Daryl Davis is a black blues musician who befriends Ku Klux Klan members. And he goes to Klan rallies not to shout people down, but to actually hear their stories. And through Daryl Davis's friendship and connection, what they found is that over 200 Klan members have turned in their robes. He didn't go in there saying, "You got to respect me first." He didn't go in and saying, "Hey, as long as you already agree with what I believe." He went in and heard stories, and he connected on the common parts of music and hearing people. And some grandmasters, turned in their robes and even made him the godfather of their children. Right? There is an opportunity. We know this even in arguments with significant others. When you genuinely say sorry, that it often changes the tenor of the conversation, rather than when's the last time somebody changed because you yelled at them or called them dumb or stupid. There's an opportunity that we have to plant seeds of respect. Is it easy? No, I'm not saying that. Will we be perfect at it? No, I'm still not perfect at it. I still make mistakes. But can we make progress in it? Yes.
That we can. I still have about 100 questions, but we don't have enough time to get to them.
I love your question.
We hardly got to any of them. We ended up, and that's okay, because it was a wonderful conversation. I do want to switch gears just because,
yes.
Interesting, here we are with this. You use profit first in your business. Just out of curiosity, how did that come to be?
Yeah, so our CFO actually recommended it to me because I was not operating from a profit first. I was paying myself when I could. And moving to more of a profit first perspective allowed me to really re-examine what our expenses were and why they were our expenses in much more meaningful ways. And so it made me take a harder look at where we were spending, why we were spending, and did we actually have to spend, as I chose to pay myself first. And so it's been transformative for us in our business. And I'm grateful for my CFO, Carolina. You're awesome.
I am glad that all worked out. And that is pretty awesome that you were able to make that switch and change that relationship with money.
Yes.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's the secret to living an abundant life?
Choosing gratitude every day.
That comes up a lot. That seems to be like the number one answer to that question. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
To spend more time being my worth than proving it.
Yeah. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, do you? Just be. Because some people are going to love you and some people are going to hate you no matter what.
This is very true.
It took me a while to figure that out. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
To create your meaningful day every day.
And that's hard to do at 18, right? Because they don't really truly understand what's meaningful yet for them. They've been filled with all these ideas from adults and who have told them what to think, not how to think. And if they can take the time to do that, I think it's definitely a game changer. If people would like to learn more about you, your work, having you come in and the books that you've written, how do they do that?
Yeah, workmeaningful.com is the umbrella website of all the work that we're doing on enhancing the employee experience. And LinkedIn, Justin Jones-Fosu. I just got done reading Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism, so I'm spending less time on social, but that's the place that you'll find me more.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky. Appreciate it, man.
Do you think you can respectfully disagree? Did you get some little tidbits on how to go about doing that, how to make choices, how to use those pillars that he shared to bridge the divide, going to curiosity, seeking the gray, agreeing to respect each other, even if you don't agree, willingness to be challenged on your perspective, to be the student and to see how that is. Also, to create a culture around you that allows disagreements. Here's the thing, and I think this is a big one. When you see people get angry for no good reason, there's some trauma underneath there that they still haven't dealt with. And that's what they got to work on. It has nothing to do with you. So just get out of the way of the explosion and enjoy. Next week, we've got Angus Nelson on to talk about confidence comes later. By the way, if you know somebody who could benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.